Nobody in that room expected Kang Siwon to go still. He arrived at the service station where Amara was sorting dessert plates and spoke without any awareness that volume was a choice. Clark. Not her name. A flattening, deliberate and practiced, the kind of small reduction that took effort to maintain consistently. Table 7's mains went out before the bread course cleared. I'm still working this section. That's not an answer. Craig came one step closer to the station. With a woman Amara's size, one step was never just one step. It compressed the available space in a way that required adjustment. Amara adjusted, shifted her weight backward onto her heels, redistributed the tray. With a belly at full term, redistributing weight was never neutral. What I run in this dining room, Craig said, is a standard. His eyes moved down to her stomach and returned without warmth. And right now you are 3 minutes behind that standard. If you can't keep the pace, I'll need to revisit whether this arrangement works for both of us. His voice carried the relaxed certainty of a man who had delivered this particular message before and found it effective. A table nearby went quiet. A man near the far wall looked suddenly interested in his bread plate. The room, as rooms did when someone decided to exercise small cruelty in a large space, redistributed its attention to anywhere else. Amara steadied the tray. From across the dining floor, Siwon could see her hands. The knuckles were dry and cracked along the creases. Chemical staining that had worked itself into the skin. Not the result of one difficult night. The result of months. I'm on pace, she said. Her voice had a particular quality to it. Not calm exactly. The register of someone who has held the line so many times it has become structural. Just barely, Craig said and showed his teeth. If this story is already under your skin and you're new here, you're in the right place. Welcome to Gloria Afro-Korean Stories. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop your city in the comments below. We build exactly these kinds of stories here, and you do not want to miss where this one goes. Siwon stood up. No nois. No announcement. He rose the way something tectonic moves, without warning and without haste, with the absolute commitment of a thing that has decided and cannot be recalled. Byungjin exhaled through his nose. Lee Jae-min put his water glass down with great care. Siwon crossed the dining floor in 9 steps and came to rest beside Amara. Not between her and Craig. Not shielding her. Beside her. Close enough that his presence registered in the geometry of the space. Craig looked up and something in his expression wobbled. The flicker of a man who had just become aware that the architecture of this moment had rearranged itself without his consent. Mr. Kang. He reached for professional. You know this employee? Her name, Siwon said, is Amara. You will use it. His voice had the particular evenness of someone who did not require volume to be understood. He held Craig's gaze the way a man held something he intended to put down correctly, not drop. And I would strongly suggest that the next time you feel the impulse to reduce a person to manage them, you check first who might be sitting close enough to notice. Craig's jaw slid open and then shut, and then found nothing useful to do. Amara's fingers found the back of Siwon's forearm. Not a grip. A message. Her touch was brief and specific. One press of 4 fingers. The private language of 2 people who had shared enough years to develop one. Don't. Not here. Please. He looked at her. Standing this close, the changes accumulated. Her face was the same face, the strong jaw, the wide-set eyes that had always looked directly at things rather than around them. But the hollows beneath her cheekbones were new. The particular shade of exhaustion around her eyes was new. The way her entire body held itself, braced at every point. Like she was perpetually absorbing the impact of something that wasn't over yet. That was entirely new. But the eyes looking up at his right now. That exact combination of iron, and something frightened beneath the iron. Those were the same eyes that had sat across from him at their kitchen table 10 months ago, and said the words he had been trying to unknow ever since. See, she said. The old name. Barely above a breath. Please. He looked at the tray in her hands. Looked at the belly it rested against. Looked back at her face. Are you close to the end of your shift? He asked it quietly. Not a question about the shift. I need to finish the section. Amara kept her voice level. You gave up any say in my schedule when you filed the papers. He absorbed that. Let it arrive. Then he looked at the curve of her stomach. and asked the question the whole room had gone quiet waiting for. Is that baby mine? The dining room did not breathe. Amara's face did not collapse. It sealed, every feature arranging itself into a mask of careful nothing. The specific expression of a woman making 1,000 small decisions in the space of 2 seconds. Her eyes traveled across the room, reading the faces she had worked to be invisible in front of for the past several weeks. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen without answering. And Siwon stood in the middle of the Grand Meridian's black granite floor, a deal worth $65 million waiting and signed at his table, and watched her walk away from him again. He did not follow immediately. That was the aspect of him that people consistently misread. They expected the reaction, the raised voice, the visible evidence of a man who had been surprised into feeling something. What they received was stillness. The quality of stillness that had nothing to do with calm, and everything to do with the kind of patience that preceded very large decisions. He walked back to the table. He picked up his pen. Lee Jae-min was watching him with the expression of a man who had invested a great deal in this evening, and was now reconsidering his actuarial assumptions. Where were we? Siwon said. It didn't have a question mark. Jae-min hesitated. Liability allocation. The third schedule. I'll revise the cap. The partners will accept it. He looked at Jae-min directly. They came 9 time zones. They won't leave without a signature. I'm offering a 12-point margin improvement that they already know is better than anything else on the table. He looked at the page. Sign the schedule. I'll return in under 10 minutes. He stood. He adjusted his jacket. He walked toward the kitchen. Byungjin materialized at his left shoulder. A presence rather than a sound. She went through the side exit, Byungjin said, low and even. Siwon nodded. He moved through the kitchen without breaking his stride, past the heat of the line, the percussion of pans, the organized chaos of a full dinner service, and out through the side exit into the narrow alley that ran behind the building. The alley was lit by a single security lamp mounted above the exit, the kind of yellow light that turned everything underneath it into a version of itself. Amara was standing against the far wall with one palm pressed flat against the brick, and her other hand cupped low beneath the weight of her belly. She heard the door open. She did not turn around. Go back inside, Siwon. He didn't. She turned. Her face under that yellow lamp was doing something complicated. The muscles holding one expression while the rest of her was holding something entirely different. She looked exhausted in the specific way of a person who has been refusing to be exhausted for so long that the refusal itself has become its own form of endurance. She also looked, beneath all of it, like the woman he knew better than he had ever known anything. What do you want? It wasn't quite a question. The truth, he said. You gave it to me 10 months ago. No. Siwon stepped into the alley, unhurried, just reducing the space between them to a distance where pretending required more energy than it was worth. 10 months ago you told me a version of something. I want the actual version. Her jaw set. There's nothing to tell. He looked at her stomach. Did the arithmetic he had been running since the moment he spotted her across the dining room. 9 months ago, Amara had been his wife. Amara. Her voice had an edge to it now. You need to leave this alone. Don't. The word broke at the end in a way she hadn't intended. She recovered it fast. Pulled her face back into order. Looked past him at the far end of the alley where the street noise made a continuous soft wall. You are not supposed to be here tonight. You are not supposed to be part of any of this anymore. Please, she said, and the please was different from the ones before. Smaller. More honest. Go back and finish your deal and forget that you saw me. He looked at her stomach. Then back at her face. The baby is mine. No. Each word placed separately, deliberately, with the spacing of someone building something one stone at a time. It isn't yours, Siwon. Derek and I had been seeing each other before I served the papers. It is not your child. He listened to the sentence, the specific weight of each piece of it. Then he watched her eyes. Amara was a person of considerable capability, and one of those capabilities was the management of her own expression under pressure. He had watched her handle rooms full of men who had underestimated her. Had watched her walk out of those rooms with everything she had entered them to obtain, using nothing but composure and the kind of confidence that didn't require performance. She was exceptional at this. Her eyes right now were not right. They were doing the particular thing that eyes did when the voice was committed to a direction the rest of the person was not. They kept trying to land somewhere safe, and finding that no such place existed. The baby is mine, Siwon said. He said it without heat. Amara. No. Her voice had gone very quiet. I'm asking you, see? Please just accept what I told you and walk away. The last part of that sentence was carrying considerably more weight than its words. The quality of someone pushing you back from an edge they could see and you couldn't, with the urgency of someone who understood what was on the other side. He filed that. Your hands, he said, changing direction so cleanly she blinked. The chemical burns. Those don't come from a few rough weeks. Where have you been working? Cleaning contracts, she said. It's not relevant. Nobody living a stable life takes industrial cleaning contracts in this city on top of restaurant doubles. He watched her face. You're not afraid of me. He said it slowly, working it out as he said it. You never have been. So whatever you're protecting right now, you're protecting it from something else. Something behind you. He reached into his jacket for his phone. Don't. The word came out before she could stop it. Sharp and sudden and real. A blade through the controlled surface of everything she'd been maintaining all evening. Don't make calls about this, Siwon. You have no idea what you'll disturb. What are you standing between me and? He said quietly. Silence. Something moved across her face. Real and unguarded, and there for less than a second before she pulled it back under. Not fear of him. He was certain now. Fear of something she had positioned herself in front of. Something she had been standing between him. And for the entire 10 months since their kitchen table conversation. And the signed papers that followed it. Nobody, she said. He tapped a contact. See, don't. Amara's hand came to his forearm. Siwon. It's Siwon. He looked past her to the far end of the alley. I need a complete trace on Amara Osei, last 10 months. Every financial movement, every location, every name she's been in contact with. 2 hours. He paused. And I need whatever you can find on Victor Crane and Dennis Woe. He didn't fully understand why those names arrived. Only that they always arrived in the back of his mind when something important had gone wrong. And the reason was not visible yet. 2 men who had spent 4 years attempting to dismantle the Kang Group's port operations from the inside. Who had failed. Who had told him, quietly and with the particular patience of men who understood that some promises were most effective when they were left undated, that their interest in him was not finished. Amara went absolutely still. A different kind of still from every other still she had been that evening. The kind that happened to a person's body when someone named the exact shape of the thing they had spent months hoping would never be named. He looked at her. You know those names, he said. She didn't answer. She was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face in the years he had known her. The expression of someone watching a flame move towards something, and understanding with complete clarity how large the fire would be and being too far away to stop it. Byungjin, Siwon said, holding her gaze. Tonight. He ended the call and put the phone away and looked at his ex-wife standing in an alley behind a restaurant, 9 months pregnant, her palms against cold brick, her face holding the specific expression of someone who has just lost the last option they had been saving. I'm going back inside to sign the contract, he said. When I'm done, I'm going to find everything. You can tell me first. Or you can wait for me to find it. Either way, I'm going to find it. Amara closed her eyes. 1 full second. Something breaking that she wouldn't let him see the full shape of. When she opened them, her voice had changed. Flat and final, the tone of someone who has spent their last chip, and is watching the table. Then find it, she said. And when it brings the ceiling down, remember that you're the one who chose to look. She walked back inside. Siwon stood in the alley for 4 seconds. Then he straightened his jacket and followed. The Hong Kong partners didn't ask questions. That was one of the reliable things about men whose wealth had reached the altitude where self-presentation mattered more than reaction. Lee Jae-min had signed the 3rd schedule while Siwon was gone. The other 2 men were watching him with the recalibrated attention of people who had just arrived at a revised understanding of who exactly they were across the table from. Siwon sat down. He read the remaining pages. He signed. He asked a question about the transit insurance clause that took 4 minutes to answer and required Jaemin to reference a separate document. For 35 minutes he performed exactly the version of himself that had built the company they were all here to expand. And he did not let the surface of that performance show what was moving underneath it. Byung-jin sat 2 tables away with a glass of water. He didn't touch and his phone face down on the table, which meant it was working. By the time the partners' cars pulled away from the curb outside the Grand Meridian, Byung-jin was at Siwon's shoulder with a slim folder held against his side, and the particular expression of a man who had found something and was measuring how to carry it into the next room. They didn't speak inside. They walked to the car. The driver engaged the route. In the quiet of the back seat, Byung-jin opened the folder. She never left, Byung-jin said. Siwon looked at the window. I know. No passport activity across the last 14 months. No international travel of any kind. No record of anyone named Derek in her contact history or financial data, during the marriage or following it. She has been in this city since the morning she left the apartment. He turned a page. She's been renting a room in a shared house on Garnet Street. 240 square feet. No functioning radiator since October. A mold issue the landlord has been documenting as resolved since March without resolving it. The tightening in Siwon's jaw was the only thing that moved. The work, Byung-jin continued, started the week after she filed. Cleaning contracts first. 2 companies, both operating under a secondary name, she registered 1 month before serving the divorce papers. She moved to restaurant work 6 weeks after the pregnancy became visible. The Grand Meridian took her 8 weeks ago. She's been running doubles. 8 months pregnant, Siwon said. It came out flat. Yes. The city moved past the window. A group outside a late-night spot. A delivery rider navigating a junction. The ordinary, unremarkable machinery of an evening that had no idea what was happening in the back of this car. The money, Siwon said. Byung-jin's voice shifted almost imperceptibly. The way a voice shifted when it was carrying something it knew would change the temperature of a room. Regular transfers. Small amounts initially, then increasing. 700. 1,300. 2,000. Always through layered accounts that resolved after 4 routing steps to the same 2 final recipients. He looked up. Victor Crane and Dennis Wo. The car went very quiet. Siwon's hands were resting on his knees. Not the stillness of composure. The stillness of something enormous arriving at a surface that had not broken yet. Total amount, Siwon said. 47,000 across 10 months. She depleted her savings first. Then wages. Her engagement ring was pawned in month 3, to a reseller on Aldgate Road. A small investment portfolio she'd maintained since before the marriage was liquidated within 10 days of the divorce being finalized. 16,000 transferred that same week. Siwon thought about the ring. He had spent considerably longer choosing it than he told her. She had mentioned once, early in their relationship, offhand, that she found elaborate jewelry exhausting, that it always felt like wearing someone else's statement. He had chosen something clean and specific in hers. He had remembered because he always remembered everything she said about herself. She had sold it to pay money to the men who had spent 4 years trying to take everything he'd built. What did they have on her? Siwon asked. Byung-jin's pause was 4 seconds instead of 1. I don't have complete information yet. But I've been able to access partial content from an encrypted message thread. The pattern is consistent with a leverage arrangement. Something that would place you in federal proximity to transactions you had no knowledge of. He turned the final page. The communications reference a name consistently. Kofiose. Siwon's gaze moved from the window to Byung-jin's face. Her brother, Siwon said. Her younger brother. 22. Byung-jin nodded. He disappeared from his documented location 13 months ago. Resurfaced 4 months ago in Manchester. No explanation covering the gap. No record of where he was or who had access to him during that period. The sequence assembled itself in Siwon's mind with the cold precision of something that had always been the answer, and had only just been asked. Kofi disappears 13 months ago. Amara files for divorce 10 months ago. The payments to Crane and Wo begin immediately after the papers are served. They had taken her brother. They had told her to end the marriage and stay quiet and pay consistently. And Amara, who loved her brother the way she loved everything she decided to love, with a totality that had no ceiling, had sat across from her husband at their kitchen table and told him the cruelest available lie, the one she had calculated would work. Because a man who believed he had been replaced would grieve. A man who knew the truth would never stop moving toward the danger. She had made him sign to keep him breathing. Siwon sat with that for a long moment. Outside the window the city went about its business. Then he said quietly and without any particular urgency, "Find me everything on where Kofi was kept and who made the operational decisions. And get me a location on Crane and Wo by morning." Byungjin was already typing. The car continued through the city, unhurried and unnoticed, carrying the specific weight of a man who had just understood the full shape of what his ex-wife had done to save his life. What followed did not happen quickly, because the things worth doing rarely did. Siwon had built the Kang Group over 15 years on one foundational understanding. That patience was not the same as inaction, and that timing was the variable that separated a move from a mistake. Crane and Wo had spent 4 years understanding that. They had not anticipated that the leverage they'd constructed around a woman they'd assessed as peripheral would be the thing that made him stop performing patience and start applying pressure. By the end of the first week, Byungjin had reconstructed the full architecture of the arrangement. Kofi Ose had been picked up in a routine sweep. Wrong place, wrong company, a single night that Crane and Wo had been waiting to use. The threat was federal. The kind that didn't require fabrication to destroy a person. Only the right framing at the right moment. They had approached Amara directly, systematically, with the particular efficiency of men who had done this before. Leave the marriage. Disappear. Pay monthly and say nothing and your husband stays free and your brother stays whole. She had assessed her options in the time it took most people to panic, and she had made the calculation that cost her the most and protected everyone else. The men who had designed that arrangement were located, separately, within 72 hours. What happened to them afterward did not make the papers. The result was that they were no longer in a position to leverage anything. Kofi Ose came home on a Thursday. He was thinner than he should have been and quieter than Amara remembered him, and he sat in the hospital waiting area while she finished her shift because she had not told him what she was carrying, and she needed to finish the section before she could sit down for long enough to tell him everything. The call from the Grand Meridian came on the 41st morning after the night in the alley. Siwon had arranged it through proper channels, through HR, through the correct general manager, which was no longer Craig, because Craig's history of conduct across 3 prior locations had been documented and submitted to the ownership group by a collection of former staff members who had been waiting for someone to ask. The call was to inform Amara that the ownership group was offering her a severance package, and a letter of reference, and the option to move to a role at the corporate level if she wanted it. She accepted the severance. She declined the rest. The morning her son arrived was the 14th of March. 6 pounds 11 ounces. The NICU team called him the mayor from his second day, because he had opinions about the position of every monitoring lead and communicated them without ambiguity. The nurse who had been primary on his care since admission presented Amara, with a card signed by the night team, when he was cleared to leave. Amara read it in the lift and wept without doing anything to stop herself, which was new, and meant something. Siwon carried the infant seat in both hands with the focus of a man transporting the most important thing he had ever held. Kofi held the door. The apartment Siwon had arranged was on the 4th floor of a building with reliable elevators and windows that faced southeast and consistent heat, and no shared walls with anyone who played music after 11. Amara had walked through it 10 days before the birth, room by room, her hands in the pockets of her coat, making notes in her phone. She had asked that nothing be hung on the walls. She would make those decisions herself. She had asked for a desk near the largest window. She had asked that the second bedroom be configured as a nursery with 3 specific items she had already identified and priced herself. Siwon had arranged all of it before she asked for any of it. When she found this, she looked at him across the hallway for a long moment. Then she said, "The lamp in the office is the wrong color temperature and I'll sort it." That was an entire speech. Both of them knew it. She moved in on a Sunday. Kofi helped. The elevators worked. Nobody said anything significant about it. They just brought things upstairs and put them where they belonged. Round table opened on a Wednesday. Amara had spent 6 weeks divided between the hospital and a rented workspace with her laptop and her son sleeping in a sling against her chest, designing something that was the precise opposite of every restaurant she had ever worked in. The concept she brought to the first builders meeting was not complicated. A neighborhood restaurant, dinner service and Sunday brunch. Lighting designed to make the room feel like a place rather than an event. Tables spaced for conversation rather than adjacency. A staff handbook she had written herself over 3 late nights, covering pay, breaks, a named HR process, and a single non-negotiable policy. Every employee at every level was to be addressed by their actual name. She called it Round Table. Nothing that needed to explain itself. Just a name that said quietly that everyone who sat here arrived on the same footing. Near the entrance, mounted at eye level, a small cream-colored frame held a line of text in dark serif print. Some rooms are built to remind you of your place. This one is built to remind you that you have one. Siwon had not suggested it. He had read it in the message she sent the designer, and he had gone very quiet for a moment, and she had known. The way she had always known most things about him that mattered. That the quiet was the fullest response he had. Opening night was 38 covers and a reservation list that had filled within 90 minutes of going live. 2 women who had worked the Grand Meridian floor, who had filed complaints that went unaddressed and unrecorded, were behind the pass and on the floor respectively. Amara had called them herself, had explained what she was building and why, had offered them first. Siwon sat at a corner table with Kofi. The mayor slept in a carrier between them, which was where he consistently preferred to be, and from which he supervised the room with the calm authority of someone who had done the hard work of arriving and now intended to enjoy the results. Amara moved through the room the way she moved through everything she had decided to take seriously, with complete attention. She stopped at tables and asked whether the experience was what people needed, and then listened to the answers. She was not performing hospitality. She was reading a room with the specific precision of someone who understood from her own experience the exact mechanisms that made a space feel hostile or safe, and she was using that understanding the way someone used a tool they had earned the hard way, to build something that had never been built with it before. A woman at the table nearest the window said to her companion, "I don't know what it is about this place." Siwon did. It had been built by someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be made invisible inside a room, and had decided that the room she constructed would be the one that never did that to anyone. At the close of the evening, Amara sat down across from him, tired in the way of someone who had spent their energy on something that mattered. She pulled the carrier across the table toward her, checked the mayor, put her finger inside his curled fist. He gripped it without surfacing from sleep. "Full house," she said. "I was watching," he said. 8 compliment cards. "I noticed those too." "Old habit," she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Full house. Candlelight. Round surfaces. The sound of a room built for people rather than performance." "I am not," she said, "going to make any of this simple. I know. I have extensive opinions about the business structure. I'm aware. About co-parenting logistics." He held her gaze. "Amara. I know." There was a pause. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face moved. Not softening. The particular settling of a person who has been fighting an argument they no longer need to win, and is choosing to step out of it, and into whatever comes next. "Okay," she said. 2 letters. The weight of everything. The mayor slept in the carrier between them. 6 pounds 11 ounces. His grip tight around his mother's finger. Breathing with the serene confidence of someone who had already done the most difficult thing he would ever do and emerged from it entirely unimpressed by what all the fuss had been about. There is a particular kind of person you read wrong the first time. You see the exhaustion and you read defeat. You see the controlled posture, and you read fragility. You see someone carrying something enormous, and you think they are barely holding. What they are, in fact, is the entire reason the structure is still standing. Amara Osei had walked into the Grand Meridian carrying everything she had chosen to carry without telling anyone she was carrying it. And she had carried it with the full dignity of a woman who had made a decision, and refused to perform the weight of it for anyone in the room. She had sat across from the man she loved in their apartment kitchen, and told him the cruelest available lie, because it was the one that would make him stop fighting. And he needed to stop fighting to stay alive. She had grown a child in 240 square feet on a salary that should have broken her, and gone back to work every morning without performing the cost of that to anyone. Now Victor Crane and Dennis Wu had no leverage and court dates they were not looking forward to. Now Craig's history was documented and a matter of record, and the women who had filed first were employed and addressed correctly and compensated fairly. Now the mayor was 6 pounds 11 ounces of full lunch certainty, sleeping in a carrier in a room his mother had built from the materials left over from the room that had tried to reduce her. The city outside moved the way it always moved, continuous and indifferent, and entirely unaware of what had been spent to arrive at this particular table on this particular evening, of what a cold alley had cost and what a kitchen table conversation had taken and what 14 months of silence had required of a woman who had decided that some things were worth carrying alone. The people at this table knew, and that was enough. If this story left something in you, tell us in the comments what moment hit hardest, what made you stop and stay. And if this is your first time here, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Subscribe, turn the notifications on, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We build stories like this one on Gloria Afro-Korean Stories, and we will see you in the next one.